Good afternoon, and thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to Africa in Perspective on PTV2. My name is Rhoda Mlenga. Now, across the continent today, major developments are unfolding, from football controversies shaking African unity to rising public protests over economic hardship and growing political and security tensions in several regions. We bring to you Africa in Perspective, with the stories shaping Africa's present and influencing its future. Let's start with our first story, where the president of the Confederation of African Football said on Wednesday that he was visiting Senegal's capital, Dakar, to support Senegalese football leadership, but stopped short of addressing directly the details of the controversial CAF decision that stripped Senegal of its Africa Cup title last month. He also expressed concern about waning confidence in decisions by referees and CAF judicial bodies. Earlier Wednesday, Patrice Motsepe met with Senegalese president, a vocal supporter of the national team since its chaotic January final, which saw Senegalese players walk off the field. Now, most of Senegal's players left the field for nearly 10 minutes as fans clashed with stewards behind one goal in protest of a controversial penalty awarded to Morocco after Senegal had a goal disallowed. Obviously, later on, the players returned and Morocco missed the penalty, and Senegal won in extra time. After the January 18th match, CAF's disciplinary board imposed more than $1 million in combined fines on the Senegalese and Moroccan confederations and handed suspensions to Senegal's coach and several players. It did not alter the results, by the way. And in March, CAF's appeals board ruled Senegal forfeited the final by leaving the field of play without the referee's authorization and awarded Morocco a 3-0 victory. Motsepe later defended this particular decision. Now, the Senegalese Football Federation filed an appeal in March with the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne, Switzerland. Let's have a look at this.
Board stripped Senegal of its Africa Cup title. Patrice Motsepe stopped short of addressing the controversial ruling, saying he was there to show his support for the country's football leadership.
The main purpose for me coming to Senegal today is to express my personal deep commitment and the deep commitment of the member associations on the African continent to represent 54 countries, our deep commitment to the football leadership in Senegal.
Senegal has appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport to reinstate its cup title. Motsepe, who's defended the ruling, expressed his concern about waning confidence in referees and in CAF's judicial bodies.
It is clear to us that we still have the legacy that has been there over many years, where some of the decisions that are taken by our judicial bodies, whether it's a disciplinary board or whether it's the appeal board, that some of those decisions do not enjoy the respect and credibility, which is very important to us.
January's chaotic cup final saw Senegalese players walk off the field after referees disallowed a goal and awarded Morocco a penalty. Senegal won 1-0, but were later ruled to have forfeited the game by leaving the pitch.
Well, from football tensions to public unrest in the very same country, Senegal is also facing mounting pressure on the streets. Now, hundreds of workers' union members and opposition supporters marched in Senegal's capital, Dakar, on Wednesday to protest what they say are broken government promises and a worsening cost of living as the country is plagued in a severe debt crisis. The protest was organized by the country's main labor unions and the Front for Defense of Democracy and the Republic, also known as FDR Opposition Coalition. Modi Guiro, Secretary General of the National Confederation of Senegalese Workers, the country's largest labor union, said the government had betrayed a deal last year that had frozen strikes in exchange for promises of better wages and working conditions. Authorities say a record debt crisis inherited from the previous administration has left the government with little money to spend. And while protesters wearing red scarves and union hats held signs demanding that the government rehires laid-off public sector workers and lowers income taxes. Now, some chanted slogans calling for the ousting of Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. The country's government, led by Sonko and their president, came to power in April 2024, promising to carry out ambitious reforms, which included fighting corruption, creating jobs for young people, and maximizing the country's natural resource benefits.
Hundreds of workers, union members and opposition supporters marched in Senegal's capital on Wednesday to protest what they say are broken government promises and a worsening cost of living. The protest was organized by the country's main labor union and by the opposition coalition known as the Front for the Defense of Democracy in the Republic. Some protesters called for the ousting of Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko.
Ici, le seul problème qu'on a pour l'économie du pays.
The only problem we have with the country's economy is Ousmane Sonko. He's incompetent. He's not capable of running the country. He should just resign. I think it was for purely political reasons, for the sake of the campaign, that the Prime Minister floated this idea of hidden debt right on the eve of the 2024 elections, so that his party could win by a landslide. He did win, but it ended up harming the country. The government's ambitious reform agenda has run into obstacles, with the country plagued by a severe debt crisis. Senegal's debt-to-GDP ratio has surged to roughly 132%, one of the highest in Africa.
La situation économique reste encore difficile au Sénégal.
The economic situation in Senegal remains difficult, which explains why the trade union Front for the Defense of Labour has decided to hold this demonstration. The opposition sees this protest as an opportunity to make its voice heard. The country's economic difficulties have deepened the daily struggles of many people, with young Senegalese among the hardest hit.
While Senegal grapples with economic pressure, elsewhere on the continent, governments are confronting challenges that could directly impact daily life. Now, in Madagascar has declared a state of emergency over concerns about energy supplies to the Indian Ocean nation. President Randira Nirina has signed a decree authorizing the government to take emergency measures to secure fuel supplies, including requisitioning stocks if necessary, and authorities can also suspend the automatic price adjustment mechanism currently in place. It also sets the cost of petrol. Electricity is generated from oil, and of course it depends on fuel imported from Oman, just south of the Strait of Hormuz. Currently, which we all know that is closed by Iran. Now, while Madagascar hasn't yet seen any disruption in supply, the government warned that the ongoing war in the Middle East could lead to disruptions in daily life, the economy, and the functioning of public services. Power and fuel shortages in Madagascar last year led to nationwide protests that resulted in an overthrow of the government.
Madagascar has declared a state of emergency over concerns about energy supplies to the Indian Ocean nation. President Randrianirina has signed a decree authorizing the government to take emergency measures to secure fuel supplies, including requisitioning stocks. The state of emergency was imposed for 15 days, but just south of the Strait of Hormuz, currently in the functioning of public services. Power and fuel shortages in Madagascar last year led to nationwide protests that resulted in an overthrow of the government.
Well, from energy concerns to international relations, diplomatic ties are also under the spotlight in Southern Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Wednesday received the diplomatic credentials of the new U.S. ambassador as relations between the two countries languish at a low EBB. Now, Brent Bozell, a right-wing media critic and staunch supporter of President Donald Trump, took up the post in February but got off to a rocky start with remarks on South Africa's racial policies and court decisions. In a brief ceremony at the presidential guest house in the capital, Bozell, alongside his spouse, was welcomed with a guard of honor before he handed over his credentials to Ramaphosa. Now, of course, 19 other envoys, including those from partially recognized Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Haiti, and Cuba, also presented their papers. Ramaphosa underscored the expectations for diplomats to respect their host country's sovereignty, exercise discretion, and raise concerns through quiet, constructive channels rather than confrontational public criticism. Let's have a look.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Wednesday received the diplomatic credential of the new U.S. ambassador as relations between the two countries languish. Brent Bozell, a right-wing media critic and a staunch supporter of President Donald Trump, took up the post in February but got off to a rocky start with remarks on South Africa's racial policies and court decisions. Pretoria-Washington relations have become strained over a range of issues, from South Africa's genocide case against U.S. ally Israel to Trump's disputed claims that white Afrikaners are being persecuted. Last month, Bozell was summoned to explain undiplomatic hate speech and criticize policies meant to empower black South Africans in his first public address.
Meanwhile, in the Horn of Africa, political uncertainty continues to raise concerns over stability and peace. Ethiopia on Wednesday extended the mandate of the interim administrator of the Northern Tigray region by 1 year, raising uncertainty over elections scheduled for June in the restive region. Now, Tigray still suffers from the aftermath of a brutal 2-year conflict ended by a 2022 peace deal that established the interim administration. The war was one of the deadliest in recent decades, claiming roughly 600,000 lives and pitting the Eritrean army. The conflict disrupted legislative and regional elections in 2021, leading to the appointment of veteran Tigray politician Reda to head the interim administration. Getachew, who faced growing criticism within the Tigray People's Liberation, replaced in April last year by Tigrayan General Tadiz Werede. Now, the TPLF says the return of around 1 million people out of Tigray's roughly 6 million residents still displaced since the 2020-2022 conflict is a prerequisite for holding the vote. For several weeks, the TPLF of growing closer to neighboring Eritrea, which maintains fragile relations with Addis Ababa, the group has actually denied this. And of course, this comes from uncertainty that seems to, deepen the tensions between the two countries. And from political uncertainty to economic reforms, efforts in Zimbabwe, something else that we need to talk about, is a story that has been making rounds in Africa. But before that, let's have a look at this.
Ethiopia on Wednesday renewed the mandate of the interim administrator of the Northern Tigray region by 1 year, raising uncertainty over elections scheduled for June in the restive region. Tigray still suffers from the aftermath of a 2-year conflict ended by a 2022 peace deal that established the interim administration. The war was one of the deadliest in recent decades, claiming roughly 600,000 people and pitting Tigrayan rebels against federal forces supported by local militias. The conflict disrupted legislative and regional elections in 2021, leading to the appointment of veteran Tigray politician Getachew Reda to head the transitional administration. Getachew was replaced in April last year by Tigrayan General Tadesse Werede. Tadesse's 1-year extension raises doubts over polls planned for June 1st, when Tigray is due to elect leaders to its local parliament and government.
And finally, from political uncertainty to economic reform efforts, Zimbabwe is taking steps to rebuild confidence in its financial system. Zimbabwe launched its upgraded banknotes on Tuesday with an appeal to national pride and confidence. The big series features the country's iconic animals to symbolize national identity and resilience. The rollout begins with 10, 20, and 50 Zimbabwe gold notes. Higher denominations will follow later, depending on demand and monetary conditions. Citizens have long distrusted their own currency, viewing US dollars and South African rand as more stable. So now the new notes are part of a wider effort to restore public trust in local money. In 2024, the Zimbabwean dollar was replaced by the gold-backed Zimbabwe gold, or ZiG, aimed at giving the currency a stable anchor that would protect it from the rapid depreciation of previous monetary regimes. The new notes will be available at banks, cash machines, and through cashback services at retail outlets. Old ZiG notes will remain in circulation indefinitely to avoid disruption or confusion among the public.
Zimbabwe launched its upgraded banknotes on Tuesday with an appeal to national pride and confidence. The Big Five series features the country's iconic animals to symbolize national identity and resilience. The rollout begins with 10, 20, and 50 Zimbabwe gold notes. Higher denominations will follow later, depending on demand and monetary conditions. Citizens have long distrusted their local currency, viewing US dollars and South African rand as more stable. The new notes are part of a wider effort to restore public trust in local money. In 2024, the Zimbabwean dollar was replaced by the gold-backed Zimbabwe gold, or ZiG, aimed at giving the country a stable anchor that would protect it from the rapid depreciation of previous monetary regimes. Old ZiG notes and coins will remain in circulation indefinitely.
And that's your afternoon bulletin of Africa in Perspective, from governance and economic challenges to regional stability and identity. Africa continues to navigate complex realities with resilience and determined. Good afternoon.